one of the things that's kind of been a common thread in all of our interviews has been the difference between the creative process and the revision process. They're not really the same thing.
Love that.
Once you've got a really firm idea where your revision process is going to go, that really colors what your creative process looks like, right? So it changes.
There's another kind of book too. I mean, I mentioned the Bob book, Bob Berg, and then the memoirs. There's another kind of book that I've done some of, and you mentioned Take the Lead, the leadership book, and Flash Foresight, the Dan Burrus book. Those are books that they're not memoir exactly. They're sort of your classic nonfiction. They're books that are whose purpose is to talk about an idea, right? So classic nonfiction, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or whatever. A book about leadership, a book about finances, a book about how to have a good marriage, a book about how to pursue your life dream, whatever. The book is, it's not someone's story, it's not a parable, it's a how-to book in a sense. It's a book that aims to convey to you the essence of these 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 ideas. To me, those books are enormously difficult to write because it's so easy for them to be boring. And if they're boring, nobody will read them. And if nobody reads them, then what's the point? You've accomplished nothing. So a book like Flash Foresight, Dan Burrus is one of the most brilliant people I have ever met. He's a futurist. He's a trend forecaster. So his businesses, he goes in and consults for Fortune 500 corporations. He's consulted for everybody, governments, corporations, all of the big names in business and government and nonprofit. He's consulted for them. And he goes in and he tells them what the world's going to look like, what their world's going to look like in 10 years, and what they can do today to prepare for that. Dan doesn't have 7 principles. Dan has 7,000 principles. Hearing him talk is like drinking out of the classic drinking out of a fire hose. Turning Dan into a book that you can read was an enormous challenge. So out of hours and hours of conversation, I eventually cycled it down to 7 principles, which seemed really solid. And then the question for me is, I approach a chapter where I want to explain this principle, and I ask myself the question, what's the story here? My view of writing is that all writing is a story. Every piece of writing, whether it's a blog post or a chapter of a nonprofit, or it's a letter, an email you're writing, or a memoir, or a chapter of a memoir, or a subsection of a chapter of a memoir, or a paragraph of a subsection of a chapter of a memoir. It's always a story. It's like you want the reader going, what happens? And it's a story, by definition, is there's something that I want that I don't know how to get, and I'm going to have to go travel to find it. I mean, it's an adventure. Every story is an adventure. So to me, if you're a nonfiction writer, the challenge is to find the story in the thing that you're describing.